On the morning of August 23, 1941, Major General Ivan Petrov stood silently on a hill overlooking the city of Smolens. The sky was heavy with smoke and dust as the distant rumble of tanks and artillery grew closer. The city, once vibrant and full of life, was now a battleground on the edge of destruction. Petrov was 43 years old, battle-hardened, yet the weight of this moment pressed down on him more than any enemy's shell. 4 days, Soviet forces had fought desperately to hold the city against the relentless advance of the German vermin. The Nazis were pushing hard, aiming to capture Smolensk as a gateway deeper into Soviet territory. From his vantage point, Petrov watched his troops fall back under overwhelming fire. Streets that had been crowded marketplaces were now silent, scarred by shell craters and rubble. Civilians fled or hid in basements, their faces etched with fear and uncertainty. The harsh reality was clear. Smolensk was on the brink of falling into enemy hands. And with it, the Nazis would gain a strategic stronghold that could change the course of the war. Petrov clenched his jaw, eyes scanning the horizon where German tanks rolled forward like an unstoppable tide. He had no illusions about the cost ahead. The order he was about to give would mean sacrificing everything, not only military equipment and supplies, but the city itself. Yet, in war, sometimes the harshest decisions are the only way to protect what remains. Ivan Petrov was about to make a choice that would haunt him and change history. Ivan Petrov was born in a small village near Smolens. From a young age, he understood hardship. His childhood was marked by poverty and the struggles of rural life. Yet he was determined, enrolling in a military academy in his youth and dedicating himself to service. By 1941, Petrov was a seasoned officer with nearly 2 decades of experience. The Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa, had thrown the country into chaos, with entire regions falling rapidly. Smolensk was a vital fortress city, and Petrov had been entrusted with its defense. His command was difficult. Resources were scarce, communication lines were strained, and morale was fragile. But Petrov's leadership was steady. He knew that holding Smolensk was not just a military objective, but a symbol of resistance against the invading forces. The city's civilians were caught in the crossfire. Families packed what little belongings they could carry, seeking safety wherever possible. Yet many stayed, bound by home and hope. Petrov often met with local leaders and ordinary citizens, understanding their fears and hopes, even as the bombs fell around them. As the German advance tightened its grip, the situation grew desperate. Petrov faced not only the enemy, but the impossible task of protecting a city under siege while minimizing civilian casualties. One night, after a grueling day of fighting, Petrov stood alone in his command post. Reports came in that the enemy was preparing to encircle the city. The choice before him was stark: allow Smolensk to fall intact to the Nazis, or destroy it to deny them a strategic prize. Petrov's mind raced through the consequences. The order would mean burning homes, factories, and infrastructure, the lifeblood of the city. Innocent lives would be disrupted, perhaps lost. But if the city fell, the Nazis would use it as a base to push deeper into Soviet territory, threatening millions more. This was the crucible of war. Sacrifice now to save many later. Ivan Petrov was a man faced with an agonizing decision, one that history would remember for its brutal necessity. The decision to burn Smolensk was not taken lightly. Petrov convened his senior officers and city officials in a dimly lit room beneath the crumbling city hall. The atmosphere was tense, shadows flickering on walls scarred by shell fragments. Plans were drawn. Key installations, ammunition depots, rail yards, factories were marked for destruction. Teams were assembled to carry out the fires systematically once evacuation was complete. Civilians were urged, when possible, to leave. But time was short. The nights that followed were filled with chaos and sorrow. Under Petrov's strict orders, soldiers ignited fires that spread quickly through the dry summer air. Flames consumed warehouses, factories, and residential blocks. Thick smoke blotted out the stars, painting the city in hues of orange and black. Petrov moved among his troops and citizens, his face hard but eyes weary. The destruction was brutal, but his resolve was unshaken. Every building lost was a fortress denied to the enemy. Every burned street was a step toward halting the Nazi advance. The people of Smolensk suffered deeply. Homes, businesses, and cherished landmarks vanished in the inferno. Families huddled and hastily dug trenches or fled towards safer regions. Yet many stayed, believing in Petrov's grim promise that this sacrifice would save lives in the long run. As the fires raged, German forces closed in. Tanks rolled toward the city limits only to find ash and ruin where vibrant streets had once thrived. The destruction slowed their advance, forcing delays and supply shortages. Petrov's gamble was costly, but it worked. The burning city became a barrier, a scorched earth's defense that forced the Nazis to halt and regroup. It bought crucial time for Soviet forces to reinforce other fronts and plan camp. In the weeks that followed, Petrov witnessed the human cost of his decision. War's cruel arithmetic left scars, not only on buildings, but on souls. Yet the commander never wavered in his conviction. His actions, harsh as they were necessary to protect the future of millions. Through the smoke and sorrow, Ivan Petrov transformed from a man burdened by duty to a symbol of sacrifice, a reminder that sometimes the harshest choices are made not out of hatred or cruelty, but from a desperate hope to stop greater suffering. As the summer of 1941 wore on, the situation around Smolensk grew increasingly desperate. Major General Ivan Petrov knew the German war machine was advancing with overwhelming force. Armored divisions rolled like thunder, supported by relentless air attacks that shredded defenses and spread terror among soldiers and civilians alike. Petrov had witnessed countless battles, but none had weighed on his conscience as heavily as this one. The city he was sworn to defend was a prize coveted by both sides. Losing it intact would mean a foothold for the Nazis, a strategic springboard threatening the very heart of the Soviet Union. In his mind, the grim truth was clear. Conventional defense was no longer enough. The Wehrmacht's firepower was too great, and Soviet reinforcements were stretched thin. The only way to stop the enemy's advance was to deny them everything, even if it meant sacrificing Smolensk itself. The idea was terrifying. To deliberately burn your own city, destroy homes, livelihoods, the very fabric of life, is a decision no commander takes lightly. Yet, Petrov knew that failure to act meant risking the lives of millions beyond the city limits. This was a scorched earth tactic on an unimaginable scale. The destruction would be total. Factories, railroads, supply depots all would be consumed by fire and ruin. Civilians would be forced from their homes, their lives uprooted overnight. When Petrov first proposed a plan to his officers, the room fell silent. Faces were pale, voices quiet with disbelief and sorrow. Some argued that such destruction would break morale and fuel despair. Others feared the long-term consequences for the city's survival. But Petrov stood firm. He reminded them of the stakes. If we let the enemy have Smolensk intact, we lose far more than buildings. We lose the future of our people. This sacrifice, terrible as it is, may be the only way to save them. Petrov's resolve inspired a difficult consensus. The plan was set into motion, with strict orders to evacuate as many civilians as possible. Local leaders worked feverishly to organize escape routes, though time was merciless. As fires were prepared, the city's streets buzzed with frantic activity, soldiers planting explosives, civilians gathering precious belongings, families saying hurried goodbyes. Smoke already darkened the sky, a grim omen of what was to come. The impossible idea had become a harsh reality. Burning Smolensk was no longer a strategy. It was an act of desperate hope, a final stand to stop a force that seemed unstoppable. The nights that followed were filled with chaos, heartbreak, and courage. As darkness fell, flames roared to life, consuming warehouses, factories, and homes. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning wood and fuel. Petrov moved tirelessly through the city, overseeing the operation with grim determination. Soldiers worked quickly to ignite key targets while trying to maintain order amid panic. Civilians fled into makeshift shelters or joined the exodus towards safer territories. The city's destruction was both breathtaking and horrifying. Streets once filled with laughter and commerce became rivers of fire. Landmarks, centuries old, vanished beneath the inferno. Yet, amid the devastation, Acts of bravery shown through local volunteers helped the elderly and injured escape. Firefighters, though powerless to stop the deliberate blaze, worked to protect hospitals and essential structures. Soldiers formed lines to escort families to safety, shielding them from stray gunfire and chaos. Petrov's own moments were marked by deep conflict. He knew that every building lost represented a shattered life. Yet he also knew the fires were holding back the enemy. German tanks approached the city limits but found only ash and rubble. The destruction forced their advance to stall, giving Soviet forces precious time to regroup and mount counterattacks on other fronts. Petrov's sacrifice was grim but effective. The scorched-earth strategy slowed the Nazi blitzkrieg and disrupted supply lines. Smolensk's ruins became a symbol of resistance, proof that sometimes the harshest decisions were made to protect what could not be saved. In the aftermath, Petrov was haunted by the cost. The city he burned was his home. The people he sought to protect had suffered terribly, but history remembers him not as a destroyer, but as a man who bore the unbearable weight of war's cruel demands. The smoldering ruins of Smolensk stood as a haunting testament to the cost of war and the harsh decisions forced upon those caught in its path. As the fires died down and Soviet forces regrouped, the tactical value of the scorched-earth strategy became evident. The destruction of the city had delayed the German advance, disrupted their supply lines, and bought crucial time for the Red Army to organize defenses further east. The aftermath was grim. Tens of thousands of civilians had been displaced, homes and livelihoods reduced to ash, infrastructure lay in ruins, and the scars on the city's landscape would take years to heal. Yet, in the brutal calculus of war, Smolensky's sacrifice was a barrier that slowed a seemingly unstoppable enemy. Historians today recognize this act as a key moment in the Soviet defensive efforts during the early months of Operation Barbarossa. The decision to burn the city, one of the most drastic scorched earth measures taken, revealed the grim realities of total war, where military necessity sometimes demanded unbearable sacrifices. The story of Ivan Petrov and Smolensk is not just about destruction. It is about the human cost behind strategic choices, the blurred lines between duty and devastation. The city's fate embodied the desperation and resilience of a nation under siege, willing to destroy its own to protect the future of millions. Even Petrov survived the war but carried the burden of Smolensk's destruction for the rest of his life. To many, he was a figure of harsh but necessary leadership, an emblem of the terrible sacrifices made to resist tyranny. In quiet moments, Petrov reflected on the faces of the civilians he could not save and the city that once thrived under his care. His story reminds us that in war, there are no simple heroes or villains, only people caught in impossible situations. The ruins of Smolensk eventually gave way to rebuilding, a testament to human endurance. Yet, the memory of those fiery nights remained etched in the hearts of survivors and their descendants. Today, Petrov's choice continues to prompt reflection. How far can one go to protect their homeland? What price is too high in the fight for freedom? The legacy of Smolensk stands as a somber reminder that sometimes the harshest acts are born not from cruelty, but from desperate hope, a hope that the sacrifice of one city could save countless lives beyond its borders. This is the history of World War II. Whoever oppresses the innocent is an oppressor. Neither the earth belongs to this oppressor, nor does the sky belong to him. We stand now and forever with the oppressed. This is WWII Files. See you in the next one.